Hey everybody, what's going on? Rob Cesternino back here with some special coverage here today because we have the pleasure of talking to a guy who I happen to know is a big Survivor fan. We've gotten to catch up a couple times before, and here he is with a new podcast of his own. It's called It's Not Only Football, a Friday Night Lights rewatch. Please welcome Scott Porter. Scott, how are you?
Man, I'm doing great. How you doing, Rob? It's been a little bit of time, man. I feel like we used to talk Survivor like once a year, and then things got life just happened, you know?
Life happens. Yeah, I'm on the other side of the country now. So, okay, we're here now to catch up and talk about what's going on here in Survivor 43. If you're listening to the podcast version, Scott is wearing the Tribe Has Spoken t-shirt. He's a
Yeah.
super fan.
Dude, this thing popped up on a little t-shirt company that I love called Homage. They're out of Columbus, Ohio. And yeah, it's got the torch just ready to be snuffed on it. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
got big like kickoff. Every time a new season starts, I'm wearing this shirt, sitting down watching the show, you know.
Scott, what's your backstory with Survivor?
Yeah, man. I watched the very first season with my mom. My dad refused to watch it for some insane reason, but my mom and I watched the very first season, every episode, must see TV, appointment television. And I was just a fan since day one. And my mom and I really share this journey together. And my dad's come around. He watches the show now. But I went to Tokyo for a year. This is way, way, way back when I was in my late teens, early 20s when the show started. And then I went to Japan for a year and sang for Tokyo Disneyland. And my mom put Amazon on VHS and
Oh,
sent it to Japan from Florida so
mhm.
that I could still watch it. So she
Yes.
would send a VHS every week
Yes.
to
Well,
Japan.
it was, a very good season.
Yeah, peanut butter, the whole deal.
Yep.
It's just one of those things where, yeah, it was a lot of money for her to mail those VHS tapes. But
Mhm.
back then you couldn't stream. You couldn't,
Right.
message boards were such a almost not non-existent thing. There was no social media. There was nothing like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would just get these tapes sent to me in Japan, and then I
Yeah.
would watch them, and then I came back, and it's just been awesome, man. It's kept my family connected for a long time. Just giving us always something to look forward to. And then when I met my wife, she is just a massive Survivor fan as well. So it's really both of
That's
our
cool.
families huge fans, and it's just been just a major part of my life for a long, long time. And luckily enough, a couple of years ago, I got to go down to Fiji and
Mhm.
do EPK, which is the electronic press kit
Yeah.
for CBS, because at the time I was on a show called Scorpion, which is a CBS show at the time, and they wanted a crossover between their scripted and their non-scripted
Yeah.
stuff. And so they knew I was a huge fan, and they sent me down to Fiji, and it was for Game Changers. And I got to interview so many of my favorite all-time players in the
Yeah.
game and do lead the electronic press kit for CBS. And while I was down there, I got to hang out with Jeff and run challenges and sleep on a beach overnight,
Mhm.
go to the first tribal
You
council.
slept on the beach overnight.
Yeah, heck
How
yeah.
was that?
Well, I mean, as long as I could, because I had appointments the next day that I had to
Yeah.
keep up doing,
Okay.
but it was pretty awesome, man. I was there. I was at camp for the first
Yeah.
3 days and got to, be out there with Ozzy and watch Sierra go home and do all this stuff, man. It was just really, really cool. And then this season, I think they had the snake challenge where you have to lift that giant snake out
Yes.
of the
Yes.
Game Changers was the first time that was out there. And I got to run that with the Dream Team, which I'm sure your listeners, I'm assuming, know the
Yeah.
Dream Team, like the people that run the challenges that are same height, weight, build, kind of shape of like the contestants to see how these challenges work and everything. So
Mhm.
it was awesome. So I've gotten to do so much. And it's just been a major part of my life for a long time.
So, Scott, when you slept on the beach, was there a shelter there or they just like left you out there?
I mean, the producers and the marketing people and the PR people couldn't like just leave me out there. So
Mhm.
I say sleep like loosely, right? Stay out there as long as I could overnight. But no, there wasn't really a shelter for us. But I mean, for me, it's kind of leisure. Like, there was a hotel I can go back to and shower before I do interviews the
Right.
next day, whereas everybody else had to stay out there. So loosely sleep on the beach, but I couldn't be in the camp. Like I couldn't be embedded like in the shelter. So was kind of just like a really cool night of just hearing the Fijian waves and looking up at that beautiful sky and knowing that I got to go to a room within, 6 hours. Everybody else has to be out there for another couple days.
And when you were behind the scenes at Game Changers, did you feel like that you had a good sense of like who was going to do well and who wouldn't do well in that game?
Oh man. You know,
How was your Survivor radar?
there was what I was noticing, I think the most was that some players had evolved and learned from mistakes, and
Hmm.
some players were out there to do the exact same thing they'd always done.
Hmm.
And we've seen that not work out for a lot of really solid players. You have to evolve. The game evolves and you have to evolve as a person. So when Sandra goes out there and I'm interviewing her and she's just like the queen stays queen all the time, it was kind of showing me like maybe she hasn't really evolved. Maybe she's not on the next level, but there are a lot of the players that people questioned, why are they a part of Game Changers? And
Hmm.
those players actually made a lot of noise
Yeah.
because they had evolved. They knew that they hadn't reached their peak and they knew they needed to do more. And I
See,
could kind of tell.
I feel like that Sandra came back like in it like almost like a different player for Game Changers. Like she wanted to. I mean, she was coming off of winning twice in Game Changers and was like ready to like had like kind of a chip on her shoulder of like I want to show people who think that I that wasn't that impressive. And I think she kind of like came out and was ready to like show off a new gear. It wasn't as successful, but I feel like that she was ready to try something new.
Yeah, in that regard, I only interviewed them
Yeah.
before the gameplay really started and saw like the first day or two. But in her interviews, she didn't seem like a different player. She might
Hmm.
have hit the beach and tried to play differently. But as far as from my perspective going in,
Yeah.
um, Malcolm felt very similar to how Malcolm had played before in
Right.
my interviews. Uh,
You knew Tony was in trouble, right?
yeah, Tony in my interview was talking about I'm going to build some new contraption. I'm going to do
Right.
Spy Shack
He
2.0.
had
Like
to be humbled.
yeah, and he was, but the people like Sarah were very much like, I'm hungry to fix my mistakes. I'm
Mhm.
hungry to come out here and do things differently. And you could kind of tell, in the interviews who was ready to play a different game. The thing with Sandra like is interesting. I always talk about this game. You can try and be something you're not and
Yeah.
try and play a character, but after 6 days of not eating under that sun in the rain with no shelter, like people show who they really are and revert to kind of who they are like again. And I think she went out there and played hard early and paid for it. But I think we would have seen more of her being okay, anybody but me towards the end.
Mhm.
I think she would have reverted a little bit. But that's just me watching the years of the show and kind of seeing people go out there and try and act like something they're not, and then having to just go back to their normal self because
Yeah.
they're too exhausted to put up a front.
Okay. So you were out there in Survivor 34. Let's flip it around. Talk about Survivor 43 here and would love to get your take on first off Survivor in the new era. How are you feeling about the changes they've made the last couple of years?
I still wish the game was longer.
Yeah.
I feel like the condensed timelines really rob us of some really important moments and some really important, I don't know, not character building because they are who they are, but the edit allowing us to kind of see more of who these people are instead of all these like special packages we get once an episode,
Mhm. Yeah.
which feels like very episode of the week, which Survivor never used to feel like that to me. Survivor used to be more about like, oh, this is the challenge this week. You know,
Mhm.
we've lost some reward challenges. We've lost a lot of interaction. We lose a lot of the political maneuvering when those things start happening. And so, I just wish the game was still a little bit longer. As far as
Yeah. And
the other
I
thing,
hear what you're saying with that, because you're coming from, really like the world of, serialized drama where, we get those stories, but those stories are like are earned and sort of like there are ways that we can get that from players without being so reliant on the flashbacks. And I just feel like, if we got a couple of them in a season, I think that'd be fine. But I feel like when you get, one or two an episode, it does feel like, oh, here we go again. Like, like once they go to the flashback.
Yeah, it's very much like, instead of, because when Owen said in this week's episode, I'm adopted. I don't know if you guys knew that. Well, actually, no. And that would have been really interesting to know throughout the entirety of the season, and trust the viewers to kind of intuit, when or how this really affects somebody, instead of like, and on this week's Survivor, a very special adoption episode. Or it's like kind of how it comes off sometimes, like as a viewer. They want to like find this one piece of adversity for every player and then like present it as like this. And that doesn't seem Survivor to me. What seems Survivor to me is when he shares that with everybody on camera for the first time, for whatever reason, whether it's tribal or it's sitting around the fire, and when he chooses to reveal all of that, as opposed to having these 5 minutes of him then talking about where he came from and all of this. And I understand it allows people to get a more solid understanding, but a lot of the viewers of the show, we can intuit some of that stuff, and we can kind of allow the storytelling as it naturally occurs to inform us. And Survivor used to be so good at that.
Well, I think there's an interesting distinction there, where that it's almost like in, Survivor, when people would have like personal stories about themselves, we would see survivors telling the personal stories about themselves to the other players. Now, more often than not with these, it comes up with like a survivor is telling the audience their personal story, as opposed to, telling the other players about their personal story.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I miss. And there was an elegance and timing of a lot of people who would choose what to share of themselves on the island, because you can go through an entire game and not share something very incredibly important. We've seen that happen. And you can go through and you can say it on day one and say, this is why I'm out here playing. And, one time that it happened on this season that I really enjoyed was Gabler's win in his, immunity challenge, where he's sitting there and he's like, this minute's for this person and this minute's for this person. And that was he's telling the tribe members who this is for. And he might be speaking into the ether and telling somebody at home, but he's not sitting down in a confessional telling us. And so for me, I didn't expect to root for Gabler at all in this game. But in that moment, I cannot tell you how much I was rooting for Gabler and Lester and his furry face.
Lester, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that was really awesome. But I feel if he would have done that in a confessional, it wouldn't have had the same impact. So
right. Okay, so tell me about where we are. We just got down to the final 10. We saw Janine voted out. Did you have any thoughts on this week's tribal?
I am so confused by a cast that is so full of really interesting perspectives, and people who presented as such strong players, and still do in a way, are coasting at this time in the game. I keep on waiting for the dam to break and people to really start playing. Like, I feel like a lot of the viewers might feel like this. I'm frustrated. With this group, because they're all holding themselves back. All of these, like Jesse has shown he can be a great player. James is super manipulative. He's very smart and seeing all the moves that could be made. Him not playing his knowledge is power was actually really brilliant. I thought, okay, here comes James. Everybody knows about his thing. He's going to guess the wrong person and James is going to be in trouble. He didn't. He held on to the advantage. Sammy's been talking about wanting to flip the game for a while. And he's actually, for a 19-year-old kid, shown some really like strong wisdom in understanding the game, but nobody wants to make that big move. And it's just a little frustrating to me. And this week was the ultimate. There were so many people that could have flipped that game. And gotten rid of, somebody like Ryan, who is kind of clueless socially, and just, flip the game, taking some power, taking some control. But, I hope it happens soon.
It would have felt like a bigger move to go after Ryan instead of Janine, because at least Ryan is attached to the power players as opposed to Janine, who has nothing. It was almost like I feel that this week, everybody just, to bring it back to football, it was, they had a chance to, score some points before halftime. And I think that everybody just said, all right, let's just go into halftime. We don't need to try to score. And, maybe some of the fans.
They took a knee. Everybody took a knee this week.
It could be for a couple of reasons. One, it looks like that we're going to do the split tribal council thing coming up at the final 10. So maybe some of the players that are like, hey, I'm not going to like waste my shot here now, when maybe I'll have a shot to do something like more bold if we go down to tribes of 5. But I also wonder if it's sort of like where like a football game where there's sort of like no scoring, or it's like a sort of like a slower pace game. And then once we get to like the 2-minute warning, when we get to like the final 7, then everybody starts like playing crazy, and they're just trying to bide their time to get to that point.
I think that's the real reason Janine went home,
Yeah.
actually, is that the last 2 seasons have shown that a player who can just kind of exist and then make one big move can win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of these players who don't have anything on their resume, they're looking at Janine and going, well, she's powerless now, but if we let her stick around and be a number, what if she finds that idol again? What if she does, Janine's a perfect example of like being able to win, like an Erica, and so it's like, might be part of the reason that they went home. But I feel like as an audience member, we don't see so much now. I feel like Survivor has started keeping things from us that are kind of really important that I want to be there for in the moment. Dwight giving Jesse an idol, and then Dwight going home, and then the talk being about, oh my gosh, Janine lost her idol, and then unveiling that to us the next week. It kind of, to me, I hated it. I don't know how you feel. How do you feel about that? Like holding that stuff back?
It's interesting because I feel like that it was something that I felt like was done for dramatic effect, where they just really wanted to, give us that pop of that Dwight. He handed the thing to Jesse, and Jesse gets to be like in the next episode, look what I had. And then we also got to feel like, oh, Dwight got voted out with an idol. Oh my God. But that wasn't actually the case of what was going on. And I did not like it. I thought about it a lot this week, that I feel like that we should be knowing, because if we knew last week that somehow Jesse got the idol from Dwight before that tribal council, I think we would be talking about, oh my God, Jesse, what a player. Can you believe this guy?
Right. And maybe I'm influenced because like I'm in a number of like Survivor leagues now. And
talk about your Survivor leagues, because I know you are a big fantasy guy. Everybody knows this. And so what's your Survivor league?
Yeah, so the way this one works, that I've been in a number of leagues in the past. I'm only in one this year, but it's like 70 players plus. And so I wish there were some changes to this particular league. I like the leagues that you draft a number of players. In this league, you draft one player, and then you get points for as long as they stick around. But you get escalating points for guessing who's going home further and further and deeper into the season.
Who's your draft pick?
My draft pick, unfortunately, this year, I had the 4th overall draft pick, and I was going to take Jesse. I was at my grandfather's funeral, however, that day, and they had to do a swap. So they swapped me to the next set of drafts, because the way it works is, there's only so many Survivor players. So you draft 1 through 18, and then it starts back over. So they put me into the second round at 4. Jesse was there in the first round, and I would have had him. He got drafted right in front of me, and I ended up taking Lindsay, who I thought, being from Philly, I thought really her or Carla had a really great shot at the beginning of the season, and then she just imploded. So I lost Lindsay, but once the merge hits, I start usually like really hitting my stride. Who's going to go home, who's going to win immunity, all these things, and you get points based for who wins immunity. Who gets to go on reward, like all these different things. The problem is that at least we know next week 2 people are going home. So, but sometimes Survivor will blindside us, and we'll not have gotten all of the information that we need to run the league, But that Jesse having the idol thing really, for me, that's information. Even if I'm not in fantasy leagues or any of this stuff, that's something I want to know, because as a viewer, I want to watch. I'm more interested in how he plays it, having the idol, and knowing going into the next week, what's he going to do? Jesse's got this idol now. What's he going to do? Is he going to share that information? And I would have much rather talked about that than the black and white of, oh, Janine's idol, is it gone or is it not? Because the next day you wake up and you go, oh, what are the actual rules? Oh yeah, Dwight went home with it, and that's it. And so we didn't have that conversation all week long. But if we knew Jesse had the idol at the end of last episode, we have that conversation all week long. What is Jesse going to do? Like, is he going to play this?
And What we still don't know, and what I wish we did know, is that when Jesse handed the idol to, or Dwight handed the idol to Jesse, then was part of the reason that Dwight got voted out was because Jesse could have gotten away with it back in Game Changers, the cast that you were out there with. We saw where Sarah, had that conversation with Sierra Dawn Thomas. Sierra Dawn Thomas says, "Hey, I've got the legacy advantage. If I get voted out for whatever reason, I'm just going to give it to you." Okay. And we see Sarah working to oh, you shouldn't have told me that.
Well, I mean, look, Jesse at the beginning of this episode is like, I've still got Cody's idol in my pocket too. I mean, I have 2 of them right now. I kind of, like I could not give it back if I choose to, because once you cede an advantage, you have to have it given back to you. You can't, there's no deal. There's no written rules that Jesse has to give any of this stuff back. You know what I mean? Like it's really that is way more interesting to me than keeping that stuff from us. But Jesse, I think in my mind, and we know this from the past couple of seasons, there's a lot of stuff that we are not seeing. And in my mind, Jesse broke up. They had the divorce back in their own tribe, like in episode 3 or 4. They're like, "Oh, okay, my island wife and I we're divorced now."
Sitting on the couch, right?
Kind of not been in the same step for a little while. So it's really interesting that Dwight made the mistake to give him the idol. But yeah, in my mind, that was definitely a very specific move that Jesse made. And it's so under the radar. I think he's really set himself up in a really good position here.
We were talking a little bit about how the last couple seasons of Survivor, it's like the people that are sort of like in the pole position around this point in the game, around the final 8, tend to not be now the players who go on to win. That it seems like that it's almost like that if you are like looking like the most likely winner around like the first half of the merge, it's actually a bad spot to be in because you don't end up actually winning. Do you feel like that that is going to be the case in this season?
Yeah, I think the way that all these people are playing has put them in a spot where there's no real clear front runner. I'd say James has a target on his back because his advantage is so well known. Carla has really put herself in a strong position, but it's so quiet. Jesse has put himself in a strong position, but it's so quiet. And that's the one thing that right now, I don't think there is a clear-cut favorite. In the way that there has been the past couple of seasons. I don't think that anybody's looking around. They're all kind of, straw man situations where Noelle somehow is still so dangerous to so many people that they had to remove part of her alliance last week. And then Janine had to go home this week. So that is the one thing that these players are doing that is smart. I don't think it's great television, but for me, I can understand. I think James is in probably big trouble. I don't think James is somebody that's going to be able to win this game. I think people are catching on to him and people are understanding that he has advantages that, he's been an information broker for a while and people are going to stop sharing with him very, very soon.
I personally see it that I feel like there's a big 3 right now. I think that James is in the big 3. I think Jesse's in the big 3. And I think Carla is also in the big 3, where I think that she's gotten, I think, like a lot of attention from the show in terms of somebody who is like running things at Coco with James. Do you think the winner comes from the big 3 or the field?
Oh, man. So you're going to say the big 3 is Jesse, Carla, and
James.
It's interesting because so early on, Cody seemed like he was in that pole position too. But people know about Cody's idol. I mean, Jesse knows about it, man, I have such a good feeling about Jesse in this game. But it's hard not to take the field because,
especially from the last 2 seasons, if you took the field, you were going to come out. That probably that.
But that's the thing is, I don't feel like it. I don't know that people on the island think that Carla is a huge threat. I think Carla could really win this game. And last week you saw Cassidy pop her head up and vote against Ryan. Ryan's going to want to suss that out. She's gotten herself in a bit of a pickle. If she would have just kept on voting with the numbers, Cassidy's somebody that definitely could have coasted through and maybe pulled a big move later in the game and won. But it's hard not to take the field. If you're saying we got to put some money on it, I will take the field, but I think Carla and Jesse could both win this game. James, zero chance
Mhm.
in my mind.
Okay. James has the knowledge is power. Do you like that twist?
I do if anybody can keep it secret.
Yeah.
Legit, like players don't know how to handle it. I feel knowledge is
Mhm.
power has been utilized incorrectly twice over the last 2 years.
And really 3 times
This,
if you count Geo, yeah.
yeah, and now James has it, and you know everyone's just going to play this shell game. I'm more interested the ripples that it causes, I guess, but I don't love it because it's just another way to screw somebody. And as
Mhm.
a viewer of the show, I do feel like we have so many really great players catch strays at trial. I mean, and it's just like they can have all their ducks in a row, and some random happenstance, advantage use, or a triple advantage play can send a great player home. I'm
Mhm.
reminded of like Malcolm when he was really playing well, catching a stray a long time ago and ending up having his torch snuffed.
Mhm.
We want to root for people. And some of those moments are like, that is awesome. They utilized all the pieces. It had to fall perfectly. But quite often, we just lose a great personality, a wonderful player, and then we're left with a group of players that nobody's really rooting for anymore. So, the more and more advantages they put in the game, I'm kind of an old school watcher who starts to cringe a little bit at it because I want these people to be able to play a pure game of making moves on their own, not needing to use advantages, understanding other people's personalities, currying votes in favor when they need it. And then if they mess up, they go home, and that was why I loved Ellie going home. Ellie going home
Yeah.
was her fault. That was all her fault. Whether she wanted to take, responsibility for it or not, which I hate the modern Survivor player never wants to take responsibility for their own demise ever. She's
Mhm.
like, this is Gabler's fault. And I never went through his bag. I'm like, you lady, you were standing right there while you were searching his bag. I mean, semantics aren't going to save you here. And she went home because she played hard, thought she had the votes, and didn't. There was
Yeah.
no advantages played. There was no immunity idols. There was nothing that happened. That was true, pure Survivor play. And that was the rest of the people sniffing that move out and sending her home. And I love that. And I want to see more of that. But advantages like what James has right now is a roadblock to that kind of play happening.
Scott, do you find that a lot of your actor friends also really like reality TV? Because I feel like that it's if you are working in like actual scripted television, that maybe like you can't watch a normal scripted show and not like be like, okay, now you're thinking about like your work, whereas a reality show maybe you don't have that.
Yeah, my co-host on the podcast, Zach Guilford, who played Saracen on Friday Night Lights,
Yep.
it's him and myself and Mae Whitman. All three of us are big fans of different kinds of reality television. I love Survivor because I think it's the single greatest game show to ever exist and a really interesting platform for social commentary to have full conversation,
Hmm.
which I think is really interesting. I also like Below Deck. That's like guilty.
Yeah.
I love watching Below Deck, but um, Zach is a huge Survivor fan too. He doesn't really watch reality outside of Survivor,
Oh, cool.
but then May, I think she loves The Bachelor, and I have to ask her why she loves The Bachelor. I can't really speak for anybody else in scripted as to why they love reality television, but there's a lot to there's a lot to learn about people as a whole, like real honest human experience by watching reality television because like I said earlier, and this is why I love Survivor, some shows you can coast as a character. Some shows you can go on and you can have a big personality and you can be the life of the party or whatever and portray that and you can get away with it for a long time. On Survivor, you can't. So on Survivor, I like how real these people get very quickly. And I just love the conversation that is had. And Jeff is just a wonderful host. The way he shepherds all through tough times and good times on the show, just says, hey, this is a part of our world. Like these conversations are a part of our life. So that's why I love it. But yeah, I think it's out of your hands. Nobody's in a writer's room necessarily creating an end for these people's stories. So I think there is an element of it being out of our hands where we watch and we're not questioning who wrote it or if that scene was necessary or this or that.
I mean, sometimes, yeah.
We watch a reality in a different way than I think we watch film or television.
Mhm.
So I think,
Yeah.
that's why I love it.
Scott, do you ever go back and rewatch any Survivor seasons?
Yeah, I've gone back and rewatched a few. Pearl Islands, I've watched more than once.
Yeah.
I went back and watched Yule and Ozzy's season because people hate that season. I
Yeah.
love that season. I love the introduction of the idol. I love how smart Yule was. I loved how incredibly physically gifted Ozzy was. I love the flip, the penner of it all. But I forgot how atrocious the idea to start that season was.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that people don't like about it. I think otherwise, I think people like all those people that are in the
Yeah.
season.
I think that as time goes on and you tell stories over and over again, and you romanticize things, you start to remember specific parts of something. The back half of that game, the merge of that season is, to me, incredible. David versus Goliath, really strong personalities. It's all wonderful. But yeah, the start of that game was, and I needed to go back and see why everybody hates this thing that I love so much. And it's because I've romanticized the end game so much that I forgot how awful the beginning of it was. And what a terrible idea for Survivor.
Bad idea. Yeah.
That's a testament to the game itself.
Yeah.
Is that they started from such a horrible place, and yet that season becomes just a seminal moment in the show's history. Like,
And you mentioned so many of the people in that season. Still also Parvati is in that season, and Candace, who plays multiple times. And so, it really ends up being, many all-stars that come out of that season.
Yeah. And it's just really cool to know that once the game can overcome, if you just let the game be, and I'm talking about the process of the game. I'm talking like the pure process of a tribe being there, living together, having to vote people out, doing that. It can solve a lot of ills for whatever producers put into it, for whatever advantages are put in. If you just let players play, very often it can overcome some of that stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah. The idea is so good that no matter what kind of crazy stuff they've thrown at it to try to kill it, somehow this thing has persevered for 20 some odd seasons, or 20 some odd years, and 40 some odd seasons. Do you have a favorite season? Is it Pearl Islands?
Oh man, probably not Pearl Islands. Tony's second win is pretty awesome.
Winners at War. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of a lot of seasons that people hate, though.
Okay.
I do love the season that Yule won. I think it's my all-time favorite season. It's just the end game there. But trying to think of my other top favorite seasons. That Tony season was just incredible. So Winners at War. Yeah, I think those two are probably my top two. I've gone back, like I said, and only rewatched a couple of seasons. Pearl Islands is special because it's Rupert's personality with that theme, and I do miss Survivor moving around the planet.
Yeah.
I do miss Survivor moving around the world. Oh, Australia. Australia too. Australia is probably one of my all-time favorite seasons too, just because of massive mistakes are almost as great television and last with you just as long as a fan as massive victories. And I do love Rob's win as well, when Rob just steamrolled everybody at the end, because there was something so interesting about him making a plan and it actually working, which doesn't always happen on Survivor either. So those are four of my favorite, which a lot of people hate all those seasons. So I know I'm on the outside looking in.
Look, everybody has their own preferences in terms of Survivor, 43 different seasons of Survivor. So, everybody's entitled to their own. Like, a lot of times it's like where you were at when you first watched them, like what kind of place in life that you were at, and sort of like what experiences you were going through at the time that they were on. So everybody's different in terms of what they like and don't like. Do you have a favorite player, Scott?
Oh man, For a little while, it was Ozzy, and then Ozzy's just blatant refusal to change and evolve.
Yes. What was it like when you met Ozzy then in Survivor Game Changers?
Ozzy is exactly who you think Ozzy is.
Yeah.
And there's something so charismatic about him. There's also something so free that you wish that you could be that personality, right? I wish I could have some Ozzy in me, man, where he's just so free to open to the world, man. He doesn't care. He's just, I don't know. There's something very, very interesting about that. But I love like the calculating nature of like a Yule. But a lot of my favorite players of all time just they kind of refuse to change. So
Mhm.
my favorite more modern player, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. He's from North Carolina. I have been on.
Chris Underwood?
No, no, he's from Carolina. He's the weatherman. The
Oh, Rick Devens. Yeah,
yeah,
no.
Devins,
He's actually from Georgia.
Georgia. Devins, one of my favorite players of all
Yeah.
time as well, and
Yeah,
just
I
the
think
way that he played his season.
sure
But
he'll be psyched to hear that.
yeah, Devin's not a huge physical threat, but somehow came to the fore as just this incredibly likable guy.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous out there
And he
as
was
well.
good at the challenges.
Yeah, he was. But he, you know, you can't be Devins in this modern age and expect to win. I'm sure I have so many other favorite players. I didn't expect to answer the question, but every season I really just am so interested in the cast that they put together. This show somehow, even to this day, still finds so many really, really interesting people who come into the game and break it in a number of different ways. And I'm always Aubrey is one of my favorite players of all time too.
Yeah.
So those are some of my favorite players. But
Yeah. So Scott, have you given any more thought to whether or not you would play in a season of Survivor? What would that take for you?
it's funny when I was down in Fiji, Jeff and I had this exact conversation, and he told me I would never have a chance to win. And
Why?
I think he's
Why did he say that? Is he negging you?
well, he's like, if we put you into a season with just a regular
Yeah,
cast,
right.
he's like, you can't, I don't care who you are. There's no way. So it just becomes more than just me. It's like somebody out there knows who I am or recognizes me from something. There's no
Yeah.
way.
So what? You say who you are.
I'd love to go out there and play, but also the way the game has evolved, it's just, I think I might have a shot to make the merge, but I'm one of the first people that goes home, at the merge. I don't think there's any way I could. It doesn't matter how genuine you are, how anything you are. Once you get to that point and there's any type of threat level that you have, I mean, this
Yeah.
game nowadays is all about removing threat levels, and you lose some really cool players that because of that. I would have a very hard time keeping my threat level down. I think just because of people's presumptions, not because of look, man, I'm 43 at this point. I've got two ankles that have been surgically repaired. I'm beat up. I'm a dad of two. Like, I don't know that I'd go out there and perform incredibly physically well. And, I am in a different generation than a lot of the younger players out there now. I look at the game a different way than they all do. And I'd probably end up playing an old school style of game, especially once the merge hit. And that would crush me. So I would love to go out there. It's a dream of mine for a long time. I don't think it's in the cards for me. But man, it's just something I love to watch every single year.
And what if they did some sort of, celebrity version of Survivor now? Because we get that with Big Brother, and they do a shorter season of. Now it's already a shorter season on Survivor, but like, what if they got it down to like 12 days, and it's all going to be people that are coming in from, maybe some former athletes are there.
I think the beauty of Survivor is meeting people who represent folks that in the world that have never never been given a moment to speak widely or present their story. I think you put a bunch of celebrities on the island and we all try and start talking about our hardships or what a tough time we're having on the island. There's no emotional effect for the audience. Everybody's rolling their eyes immediately. So unless it's like a really breakneck kind of thing, it would feel more like The Challenge, I think.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where it's a popularity contest. It's all of these things and it's who can maneuver. I think it would be a lot more cutthroat. And I just don't know that it would make for a great season. Survivor
Mhm.
is such a unique game, and I don't know that Celebrity Survivor works. But I know, Neil Patrick Harris and all these people out there that are just huge, huge Survivor fans.
Mhm.
They'd all have their fan bases kind of rooting for them and not really getting into the gameplay. You know what I mean? And so I just think there's so much stacked against
Okay.
that. I don't think
So
anybody
you
wants
are
celebrities to
regular Survivor or GTFO?
win. Regular Survivor.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Regular.
I'm a big fan of. I wish that they would do just a naked season soon, where all
A
of a sudden there's
naked
no idols.
season.
No, no, not physically
Okay.
naked,
I
but
mean, like Naked and Afraid. Yeah.
I wish like Survivor would just do a season where all of a sudden there was no idols, there was
Back
no
to
tribe,
basics. Yeah.
there was no tribe swaps.
Right.
You hit the merge. There was no double eliminate. And because all these players now, they are forecasting what is going to happen in the game.
Mhm.
And I think it's really, for me, I would love to see everybody forecasting, okay, there's got to be a tribe swap coming. Okay, yeah, the merge has got to be coming. And like all these things not happen. And
Mhm.
so all these plans and defenses and triple counters that they've built into their gameplay just kind of go away. I would love that as an OG fan, but they'll never do it again. And that's fine. But yeah,
You never know.
you never know.
Yeah. I thought they had a chance to do that after Winners at War. I thought that maybe the new era was going to be, all right, drop the 4, keep the 1. We're starting to like hitting it. Like after Endgame, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
after the Infinity War, all right, and they said, no, we're actually going to make it more crazy. Okay.
yeah. The nuts thing about all this is, for a couple of seasons there, people were like when Ben with the fire making challenge
Sure.
popped up. A lot of the fan base I would read and I would go out there and I'd see on socials or whatever, it'd be like, oh, they just really loved Ben. So they like gave him every opportunity to. No,
Hmm.
those things, when I was down there Jeff hosted a lot of the reporters and everybody that were down there for the beginning of Game Changers. And he has this whiteboard that has the craziest ideas written on it. And that idea was on there. Um, the Beware Advantage was written on there. I mean, these are ideas that they're 4, 5, 6 years old,
Hmm.
7 years old, like that he had written up on a whiteboard. They know that they're going to deploy these things every season, which is really something that's kind of cool. And so I've had like inside information for a little
Yeah.
while, like, oh, I know this thing's going to be coming. I know this thing's going to be coming. I know, but
But Scott, do you ever stop and really just like beat yourself up that you didn't just erase the whiteboard when you were there and you could have prevented all these things from coming into the game?
no, I wish I would have been sneakier trying to take a picture of it. Jeff,
Oh,
Jeff caught me and he's like, Porter, what are you doing, Porter? But the crazy thing with meeting Jeff and getting to hang out with him, he told me the crew would binge Friday Night Lights. They would go and every night like watch 2 or 3 episodes when the
yeah.
contestants would be out on the island. Like they'd be there and like whatever country. I mean, this is back before they were just in Fiji the whole time at a resort or wherever they like the whole crew stays now. Uh, and I'm just thinking about it as we've been talking about that. Like, I need to get Jeff on our podcast. Like,
Yeah.
I want
Okay.
to see because you asked, you're like the scripted element versus reality, and I was thinking about it coming from my direction, but for somebody who does reality like Jeff and hosts and does these live tribals so well, like what was it about Friday Night Lights that made him want to binge the show? Like, is Dylan, Texas like Survivor Island? I mean, it kind of is in a way, if your storyline doesn't cut it, we just remove it from the show. So
Yeah. Well, I think that they're like thematically, I think that there's some um things that are, mutual to both the shows. Like basically, it's sort of like, you're in this arena and sort of like, the world is watching you like in these moments and there's these people and we're sort of like seeing like their lives outside of this time, like in the arena. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a great show that and people love it. I know you got the podcast coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing that's different on the podcast?
yeah, it's called It's Not Only Football. And I think that's what everybody who has ever watched the show and fallen in love with it and like told your friend who doesn't like sports, you're like, hey, you got to watch Friday Night Lights. And they're like, I'm not a football fan. And like, it's not only football. It's like,
Mhm.
that's not what it's about. It's about this town. It's about these people within the town, all the pressure that is put on them. to live up to a certain expectation of a generation gone by. God, this is very much like Survivor, actually.
Mhm.
Like the OG players looking at the new players and like expecting so much from them, being disappointed at every turn. But we wanted to do more than just do like a Friday Night Lights rewatch. It's myself, Zach Guilford, who played Saracen on Friday Night Lights with me, and Mae Whitman, who was on a show called Parenthood that was created by the showrunner from Friday Night Lights, Jason Katims. They shot very similarly on Parenthood to the way that we did. And we kind of came up with the idea to go, all right, let's talk about Friday Night Lights. But, you know, the full title of the podcast is It's Not Only Football, Friday Night Lights and Beyond. We wanted to talk about what we went on to do after Friday Night Lights, talk about a show like Parenthood, talk about all the cast members and where they have gone, because
Mhm.
that show launched a number of careers, both on the writing side and the acting
Sure.
side, because of just, it was lightning in a bottle. We want to share our experiences with the fans of what it was like to film that stuff, but we also want to talk about everything that we took with us after we left the show.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll have people who are on the show as our guests, and then we're hoping to have people like a Jeff Probst be a guest on the show to talk about the reach of Friday Night Lights. Why somewhere on the other side of the globe, him and this crew that are working so hard to do this crazy season of reality television, you know, say in Cambodia, I guess they were watching one of the seasons when they were over there,
Mhm.
why it was important to him and his crew, and like why that reach existed, and kind of have this discussion of how do you think it's similar, you know? So we want to have somebody like Glenn Powell, who was in Top Gun, but is from Texas and never played a part on the show, but loves Friday Night Lights until the end of his day. Like, what was it that affected people? So that's what we're going to be doing on the podcast. You know, the first episode is out on November 10th, and we talked about our casting journeys and how we got involved in the show. And then on November 17th, our second episode drops, and we're going to start breaking down the pilot. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and hope people out there that are listening that are big fans of Friday Night Lights will come along for the journey. And if nobody's ever watched it, then this is kind of the perfect show.
Watch it for the first time.
Yeah, to watch it for the first time with.
Are you going to do spoilers? Will you talk about things if people are watching for the first time?
We say at the beginning of every episode, we're going to assume that people have watched the show.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched the series, today this is what we're going to be talking about. So
yeah, you'll say that, but you'll say, "Oh, you ruined the show for me."
Listen, man, I'm in God of War Ragnarok.
Mhm.
That just came out this last week. I play Heimdall, and the day before the game released, they announced my character. Nothing about my character, nothing about anything that has to do with it. And it was spoiled 2 weeks ago on YouTube anyway.
Mhm.
And so they released this photo, Scott Porter as Heimdall, with the art of my character.
Yeah.
And yeah, the world went, like, you would think that, you know, buildings
Mhm.
on fire. The amount of people that were like, "Ah, my eyes, spoilers! I guess you got spoiled by the company." That I'm like, this is crazy. They're out there. Spoilers are out there. The great thing about technology is that you can press pause on anything, or you can choose not to open an app anytime you want. So if you want to avoid it, you still can in this day and age. So we try to give the warning. I know that some people are going to be upset, but you know, at the end of the day, we have to assume that you've watched it, because in order to talk about our full experience on the show, sometimes we're going to have to reach into the future to kind of, you know, talk about things that we went through when we were filming that show.
Now, do you watch The White Lotus?
Oh, love White Lotus.
Because White Lotus is created and written by Mike White, former Survivor, and also that season 1 featured your co-star from Friday Night Lights, Connie Britton.
Yeah, she's phenomenal, and that's exactly who we want to talk to. We want to talk to somebody like Mike White. We want to, of course, have Connie on the show, but we want to have Mike on the show. You know, we want to have somebody like, you know, that has just been out in the world and created incredible shows that, like White Lotus, you know. And we have to find out if Mike's a fan of Friday Night Lights, but like that's what we want to do. You know, we want to reach out and find people that enjoy the show. But man, White Lotus, we want to talk about his show, what he created, what the basis was for that as well. That's what we want to do. We want to find amazing pieces of art and everything. But yeah, I know Mike White, Survivor, into, you know, White Lotus, or Cochran, who was on the show, who became a writer for a couple of different shows as well. You know, there's a lot of crossovers. And now I'm sitting here talking about Survivor and Friday Night Lights at the same time. I'm getting super excited because we shot on Friday Night Lights with no marks or no rehearsals. We just had 3 handheld cameras going at all times just to capture moments. And that's exactly what they do on the island. You've got these 3 producers with these like 6 cameras. They're just, see these cameramen running around the island trying to get over to the water well when somebody gets up and takes a walk, you know? And that's really how we kind of shot on Friday Night Lights. I broke the camera operator's foot once because I didn't know she had rolled herself behind me in a scene, and I threw a table, and they didn't know I was going to throw the table. But we were given freedom of movement to just be as honest as possible in Friday Night Lights. And I throw this table and it landed on her foot and broke her foot. I felt terrible, but it was guerrilla filmmaking. And that's exactly what they're doing out there on the islands as well as Survivor. So now we got to get Jeff Probst on a podcast. That's the thing.
I think he would do it.
I think he would too. I would hope.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of friends now, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do get the sense, that he has a lot of friends that are into screenwriting and writers. And so I think that, these are the kinds of things that I think he likes talking about. He wants to get out of just talking about reality.
Yeah. Well, there's no scripted show more real than Friday Night Lights. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
See though.
And Scott, how are your fantasy teams doing this season? Has it been a good year?
Yeah. So fantasy football, I saw something coming for quarterbacks in this league. It has been an awful year for quarterbacks. The older generation is just aging out. Unless you have one of the top 4 to 6 quarterbacks, your team is struggling this year.
Yeah.
We've been able to downplay the importance of that position for a long time in fantasy football. Say, wait on quarterback, wait on quarterback, wait on quarterback. So 3 of my leagues, I'm doing awesome because I drafted a quarterback early. I've got Jalen Hurts in a couple of leagues. I've got Lamar Jackson in a league, Justin Herbert. But in all my other leagues, I was like, I'll wait on Russell Wilson, who I almost never draft. My favorite team is the Broncos. I almost never draft Broncos because I don't want to be in the position of rooting against my team for something to happen or being doubly invested in my team.
Yep.
And they get a win, but my player didn't do enough. So I'm still grumpy about my team winning because Cortland Sutton didn't catch, 10 balls and a touch. So the teams that I drafted quarterback early are doing incredibly well. I'm in a charity massive league called the Scott Fish Bowl.
Yes. I see it in my timeline all the time.
Yeah. Scott Fish Bowl is really cool. This guy, Scott Fish, has been a part of the industry for a long time. And he goes, we should be able to harness this for good. So he asks that people give, $100 to Toys for Tots or maybe to buy coats for the homeless or do something because this takes us through the holiday time. And everybody donate somewhere. And it's an honor system, but you can send what your cause is to Scott, and Scott will retweet every single one of them. And he just built this league. There's over 3,000 players this year. My team is in the top 300. So I'm pretty proud of that squad. And I've got a couple other teams that I'm in with some of my best friends where I'm doing really, really well. But this is a year where I'm either 7-2 or I'm 1-8. It's just that kind of thing. So
yeah. All right. Well, Scott, thank you for making some time to come on and talk about Survivor. Best of luck with the brand new podcast. It's not only football, available wherever you get your podcast. Anything else you want to tell people to check out? Oh, man. I mean, it's been a busy fall, but we've been putting so much time into this podcast. Had some other things come out. God of War, second season of Ginny and George is coming up soon. I did a musical comedy for Hulu called Up Here with the composers from Frozen and the director of Hamilton, which was really cool, that my co-host on the podcast, Mae Whitman, is a lead of as well. So there's some really cool stuff coming in early 2023. But right now, we're just nose to the grindstone. I know you know how it feels. Podcasts, they're not the most difficult job in the world, but they are not easy. It is a constant. Depends how many you do. Yeah. It's like having a podcast is like having a child in a way, where there's just this constant need for attention or this constant need to create and put out more product for people to listen to. So, we're finding out very quickly, we're trying to get a bunch of episodes kind of banked before the holiday season happens, but we're having a blast. So it's not only football, Friday Night Lights and beyond. Everybody can find it anywhere they listen, download, subscribe to podcasts, or they can find us on YouTube as well. Okay, cool. Scott, thank you for coming on and talking about some Survivor with us here today. I know all the listeners appreciate it. Thanks so much for checking this episode out, everybody. Plus, plenty more about this week's Survivor episode up at robisawebsite.com. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye. Peace.